Hey, what's up, guys? Alright, so chapter 268 of Black Clover is out, and I am really trying hard to calm myself down after reading this chapter because it was just so fucking exciting. I am hyped to talk about the chapter. This actually might be the most hyped I've ever been about a Black Clover chapter that had pretty much no action or whatsoever since the series began. Because this chapter, Tabata, with this chapter alone, answered so many questions that I had about Asta, his origin, his mom, his parents, and the anti-magic devil all in one chapter. So many questions answered, and for the first time, we left the chapter with more questions answered than new questions being brought up. So like I said, I'm excited to talk about it. This is one of those chapters that if you haven't read the chapter yourself just yet, go read it now. Don't watch videos on it spoiling yourself. Just go read the chapter for the first time for yourself because you want to experience this. This is something you want to experience firsthand. But anyway, getting into the actual chapter, which by the way, it actually feels really fucking good to finally be able to do a review on the official release, the official Shonen Jump release. Usually I do my reviews based off the fan translations, so sometimes there's translation error, sometimes we don't get the dialogue just right. But this time, because of the fact that it came out Friday, I was able to actually do the review based off of the actual official translation. So this is going to be a more accurate, more detailed review than it usually is. But anyway, getting into the actual chapter, we started off pretty much where the last one left off with Asta saying his magic words of, just because you're a devil doesn't mean you're actually a bad guy. And Asta saying that pretty much caused AMD to have a flashback, which in this flashback, we not only end up finding out the origins of AMD, but we end up finding out exactly how the devil world works, how the underworld works. So basically what ends up happening is that devils born in the underworld are born with their rank. Like immediately as soon as the devil is born, it's already determined if it's going to be a top rank demon, if it's going to be a low rank, or if it's going to be a bottom tier demon. And of course, because of the fact that AMD was born, as we find out in the chapter, without any mana, without any magic, he was the bottom tier of the list. So here's how the pecking order goes based off of what AMD says in this chapter. So you got the top ranked demons like Lucifero. They're at the top of the top, and they pretty much just run the show. They're pretty much treated as like the kings, the gods. They basically control everything, and because of the fact that the underworld is apparently very boring, there's not really much entertainment there, they find their entertainment by picking on lower ranked demons. And because of the fact that the lower ranked devils are being picked on by the upper ranked devils, they in turn pick on the devils who are even below them, which would actually be the bottom tier devils, which is again where AMD ended up falling. So pretty much throughout his entire childhood, AMD was picked on, bullied, thrown around, treated like shit because of the fact that he was born without any magic. And you know what? Not only that, we also see that AMD was a very, very small kid. I mean, like, when it comes to the other devils and you see him in the flashback, they tower over him. And not just like in a way an adult towers over a kid. I mean, in the way like a giant towers over a kid. But seeing the way AMD was actually treated in this chapter by the other devils, it kind of reminded me of Chopper's origins from One Piece. And I might be misremembering it. But if I remember correctly, after he ate the devil fruit, and actually probably even before that, because he was smaller and different from the other reindeer, they treated him like crap and kind of bullied him until his adopted father, that doctor, I forget his name, I forget what his name was, but until that adopted father of his took him in and got him away from there, he pretty much was treated the same way AMD seemingly was treated in the underworld. Also, based off the way AMD was treated and his origins, he has a lot of resemblance to Asta. I mean, because of the fact that Asta, again, was also born without any mana, and he was treated like crap by people around him because of the fact that he was born without any mana. I mean, there's a major difference between the two of them. Unlike AMD, Asta wasn't actually bullied. He wasn't basically like, thrown around, beat up all the time. Because AMD mentions that since the day he was born, there wasn't a day that he wasn't bloodied and beaten up by the other devils. I don't think we ever saw Asta, or we found out from Asta's origins that he ever got really beaten up by anybody for not having any mana. But he was ridiculed and made fun of all the time for it. So there's an obvious kinship between the two of them based off of their past experiences from being born without any mana. We also end up finding out from the beginning of AMD's flashback that another way devils, basically got past their boredom was by messing with humans in the, obviously, human world. And one day, because of the fact that a devil was kind of irritated and he was bored, he decided to take AMD. Oh, I forgot to mention, the barrier between the human world and the underworld is kind of like an actual physical wall that's kind of like the roof to the underworld. And like I said, one day, because the devil was very bored and kind of upset, he took AMD and just tossed him up there, like as hard as he could, tossed him to the wall. And of course, because of the fact that devils aren't allowed to basically go to the human world without forming a contract with a human, AMD thought he was going to end up dying as soon as he hit the wall. But because of the fact that, and I guess it's because he thinks it's because of the fact that he doesn't have any mana, and because he was already on the verge of death anyway, that he was able to actually pass through the wall and end up in the human world. Of course, once he got there, he wasn't treated any better. I mean, he even mentions in the chapter that he actually had no malice towards any humans. He didn't really care about them, like, messing with their lives or, using them as, like, entertainment the way other devils did. He kind of just wanted to live a peaceful life. But as soon as he got there, because of the fact that he very obviously looked like a devil, humans immediately became fearful of him. They, called magic knights to attack him. And he, again, was beaten and bloodied just because of the fact that he was different from other people. So they actually beat the shit out of him. Like, these magic knights didn't kill him. They left him for dead pretty much, though. And he was about to die in the forest, and he actually had accepted his fate. Even at this point, he didn't have any malice towards the devils that beat him up in the underworld. He didn't have any malice towards the humans who tried to kill him in the human world. He just kind of, I guess because of the fact that he was experienced this since birth, and he never had any real kindness shown to him, that he kind of just accepted that this is how things are and never really seemed to, like, defend himself and never really seemed to actually take personal grudges against any of these kind of actions being thrown at him. So when he's left for dead by the humans, he doesn't say this in the chapter, but you can tell by the way he's acting and the way his monologue is going that he seemingly wasn't that afraid to die or didn't really care. He just kind of like, oh yeah, this is how it's gonna go. Now, even though seeing the humans actually act the way they did and beat the shit out of this AMD because of the fact that he was a kid made me really pissed off, I did kind of understand why they did it, because as far as they're aware, the only other experience they've ever had with a devil was 500 or at about 500 years prior to this, when Lick got turned into a devil and went on a rampage. So it makes sense that, seeing a devil, they would be afraid, even if he is a small child looking devil. Now, obviously, because of the fact that he's in the present day, AMD doesn't die during these injuries. And the reason why he doesn't end up dying is because of the fact that while he was basically on the verge of death, Asta's mom found him in the forest and brought him back to her home. Which, by the way, we end up finding out from this chapter that Asta's mom's name is Lisita. I think that's how you pronounce it. Obviously, I don't know how it's pronounced just yet because there hasn't been any proper pronunciation for it in the anime or by anyone else just yet. So I'm just going to go with that, Lisita. But she finds him, and we end up finding out what her magic is. She uses her magic to basically transport him to the house, because her magic apparently is that she can take anything, living or non-living, that doesn't have mana, and transport it inside, or put it inside of an object and use it to safely transport it. So that's exactly what she ended up doing with AMD. She used her magic to basically put him inside apparently this little bottle that she carries around, and she transported him to her home. I guess in this way, it kind of puts him in a stasis-like situation where his injuries won't worsen while he's there, and that way she was able to safely, move him without, worsening his injuries, and then get him to her home and quickly heal him up before he ended up dying from them. But she ended up saving his life, and we see her not being, he even mentions or even asks her, "You're not afraid of me? I'm a devil." And she said, "Just because you're a devil doesn't mean you're a bad guy." Again, the same exact lines that kicked off this flashback that Asta said to AMD. And this chapter just pretty much shows not only did Asta get his looks from his mom, he also got pretty much her exact same personality. Also, I find it kind of funny, and actually this answers a huge question I've had for a while now. And as we end up finding out that right before, well, not right before, but a little before Asta's mom actually found AMD, she also came across Asta's future grimoire, the 5-leaf grimoire that was originally Lich's before Zagred turned it into the 5-leaf grimoire. And she said, "Wow, this actually must be extreme luck, or maybe the rumors are true that if you find a 5-leaf Clover grimoire, you eventually run into a devil." Because again, like I said, not only did she end up finding that, but a little after she found that grimoire, she ran into AMD. And I'm not sure if this is about saying that it was kind of fate for Asta and AMD to end up together, but the fact that she found AMD, and honestly because of the fact that we now know what her magic is, that her magic is able to put things without mana inside other objects, it's clear, as we already find out from the end of the chapter, she's going to end up putting AMD inside the grimoire. So it kind of is like fate for Asta and AMD. It seems like the two of them were kind of destined to meet each other and eventually end up becoming partners. Also, we end up finding out, which is very sad, and just, even more sad on top of this sad flashback already, but we end up finding out that Asta's mom actually has the same kind of affliction that apparently Henry does, and actually probably even might be a little bit worse. And that is that basically Asta's mom is living on the secluded parts of the village, or actually outside of the village, because of the fact that she has the disability, I want to say, or curse, disease, whatever you want to call it, that she will suck not only the mana from people, but also their life force. And we see this demonstrated by the fact that there's actually a poisonous snake in her cottage that's kind of like slithering up behind her, ready to basically attack her. And the second it actually gets in striking distance, its mana and life force actually quickly drain from it. It drops to the ground and dies. Now, what's interesting about this is the fact that unlike Henry, who we know was actually born with this curse, Asta's mom, Lucida, she more than likely got it not that long before she actually ended up meeting AMD. And the reason why I say that is because later on in the chapter, we see this flashback of her, and we see that this is when she gave up Asta. We see this flashback of her putting a basket down outside of a building, and we know based off of what she says in that part of the chapter that this is pretty clearly when she had to give up Asta for adoption or actually leave him in Hage Village, because of the fact that if he was around her, she would have eventually sucked his life force away and killed him. And she obviously didn't want that to happen to her own child. And that's the reason why she abandoned Asta, which right away answers that question as to why Asta was left at Hage Village, but also brings up the idea that obviously she had to have gotten it at a later point in her life because she eventually had to have, done the deed to get, pregnant. And she wouldn't have been able to do that without quickly killing her partner, so she must have gotten affected by this curse either during her pregnancy or a little after she gave birth to Asta. And actually, if she was affected by this curse or this disease or whatever it is while she was pregnant with Asta, this could actually explain as to why Asta was born without any mana. Because if you go back again to chapter 96, we have that line where the Witch Queen says if sudden mutation in your body caused you from developing any mana. Originally, when I read that line, actually especially after reading last week's chapter, I thought we were going to end up finding out that because of the fact that Asta was tied to AMD from an early age, from birth, pretty much from birth, that AMD was the mutation that caused him not to gain any mana. What if the reason why Asta never gained any or developed any mana throughout his life is because when he was born, because his mom had this disease or curse, a part of it was passed on to him, and instead of basically draining any mana from other living creatures, mana was drained from himself. Maybe this curse is actually still active inside Asta, and it's basically just mutated into this form where he basically, any mana that he would develop is instantly sucked away by the curse. Now, because of the fact that she's obviously very lonely, and because of the fact that she sees a devil child, or a child at the very least, that needs some kind of love and affection, she immediately decides to adopt AMD, who she actually ends up naming, I believe, Lieb. I think that's how you pronounce it. Again, I don't know the proper translations or the proper pronunciation for these words just yet because no one said them out loud to me. I haven't had them in the anime just yet. So, as of right now, I'm going to call Asta's mom Lucida, and I'm going to call AMD Lieb. So, like I said, she actually ends up adopting Lieb, and the two of them pretty much, as we see from a quick little montage, the two of them pretty much go on for quite a while, living like mother and son. It's actually kind of cute seeing the way AMD acts in this chapter. I mean, compared to what he's been like for the past two chapters, or pretty much since the beginning of the series. This is kind of nice. It's actually kind of cool seeing this character is always kind of being depicted as kind of like sinister, and it's this like sweet, innocent little child. But we see for the first time AMD's actually getting some love and affection from someone else, and this changes him. He actually gets really, really attached to Asta's mom. In fact, at one point in the chapter, he even calls her mom. But of course, because of the fact that this is a tragic backstory, things can't always stay the same way. They can't just keep on being happy. And while they're out one day, basically after Asta's mom, after Lucida, basically says, you saved me from being lonely, so thank you. Just at this moment, that's when things take a turn for the worse, and Lucifero takes over AMD's body and says that he's going to use Lieb as a way to basically find his own way to bring his body into the human world without having to form a contract, which he's actually surprised that there actually is a devil. Lieb kind of gives him the inspiration to do this, because at first we kind of get the impression based off the dialogue that Lucifero was kind of just bored and he was just searching for AMD as like a plaything, and when he possessed him, he was surprised he actually did manage to find him in the human world. And since Lieb was in the human world while being contracted to a human, he's like, well, I mean, if you did it, I can probably find a way to do it as well. So that's pretty much what his plan is. He's going to use Lieb as a vessel to basically find his own way into getting into the human world without having to contract to a human. But of course, Asta's mom, or Lucida, because of the fact that, obviously this is pretty much her son, she's not going to give him up that easily. So she immediately goes on the offensive against Lucifero. And surprisingly enough, her curse actually affects him as well, where she actually starts draining the mana from him. Because at first he's not concerned by her getting in his way. He's like, you're just a human, what you're going to do? And then she starts draining the mana from him, and he quickly gets panicked. Not like panicked as far as he's like afraid of her, but panicked as this person actually might be able to interfere with my plans. I need to get rid of her. And unfortunately, he ends up doing that by stabbing her with his arm right through the stomach. And this moment right here actually answers the question as to why Lieb had such a hatred towards higher ranking devils, but he has such a different reaction when it came to meeting Zagred versus coming face to face with Lucifero. Because if you remember back to chapter 246, Lieb had such a violent reaction to seeing Lucifero, where he was basically just drowning Asta in his emotions. And then after he stabs her, Lucida actually manages to force Lucifero out of Lieb by basically activating her magic and starting the process of putting Lieb inside of the Five-Leaf Grimoire. Now, this is pretty much, and not Dante, Lucifero even mentions this in the chapter when he's actually being forced out of Lieb. Who would have thought that the human would actually force me to retreat? This is something that he pretty much says, not word for word, but pretty much what he says in the chapter. And you would think that this would actually be a lasting moment for him, or like a memorable moment for him. But if you go back to chapter, I want to say it was chapter 243, when Dante asks Lucifero if he recognizes Asta's demon, he says no. And now it could be that he was lying, or maybe he really doesn't actually remember him, which would be very surprising because not only is it a devil that doesn't have any mana that exists in the human world, I mean, sure, he probably didn't actually get to see what Lieb actually looks like, so he probably didn't recognize him because of that, but you would think he would remember Asta's face. But anyway, yeah, she ends up pushing him out, and then we get the very, very sad, like very heartbreaking goodbye between the two of them, where she is just on her knees crying, like she's barely hanging on, she's struggling, she's crying, and she's saying that she's going to put him inside the grimoire to protect him from Lucifero, because as long as Lieb is out in the world, at any point, Lucifero or any other high-ranking devil could easily possess his body. So in order to protect him, she's going to put him inside the grimoire, and she says that by the time he gets released from the grimoire again, he should be all grown up and strong enough to protect his own body. And he's crying. This is actually the moment where we actually get a tearful mom scream from him, right before he actually gets put inside the grimoire, and she eventually passes away. Which of course leads to eventually the grimoire being picked up, taken to Hage Village, and then Asta eventually, at his 15-year ritual, ends up getting getting the grimoire, and joining forces, or actually becoming contracted to or connected to AMD. Man, I gotta say, I'd always considered that Noelle possibly had the saddest backstory out of every character. But after reading this chapter, I'm sorry, Noelle, you gotta move over. It is now AMD. It's now Lieb. He has the saddest backstory out of all the Black Clover characters we have met so far. Now, the chapter actually ends with us going back to the present day, and Lieb basically just freaking out at Asta, saying, all devils are evil, and if I have to, I'm going to take over your body so I can exact my revenge on all of them. And that's pretty much where the chapter ends. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen. He's just basically acting out of anger. In the next few chapters, we're going to see him and Asta fighting, and at some point, Asta's basically probably going to hug him, or he's going to talk him down, and the two of them are going to form some kind of formal contract or some kind of actual pact where the two of them are working together in unison. But who knows? Maybe even we actually might end up seeing in those chapters where Lieb actually reveals to Asta his origins, basically what ended up happening to his mom, the fact that the two of them are kind of surrogate brothers, and the fact that, Lucifero was the one who killed her. So this actually might drive Asta even more towards wanting to have the personal rematch and personal fight against Lucifero, because he already wants to fight Dante and Lucifero again to save Yami. But now that he knows what happened to his mom, or potentially will know what happened to his mom, this might drive him to say, all right, well, now I have a personal grudge against this guy, or he's my personal opponent for this fight. I have to be the one to defeat him. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much all that happens in the chapter. Like I said, such an amazing fucking read. We had so many questions answered by this one chapter alone. I mean, we end up finding out Asta's origins, because even though we don't see it happen, we can pretty much assume that Lucida, when she was on the way to drop Asta off at the orphanage in Hage Village, came across Yuno's basket. Because if I remember correctly, from the chapter that we got Yuno's backstory, we didn't actually see Ralph's dad drop Yuno off in the village. He used his magic outside of the village to transport Yuno's basket into the village and just left it there, assuming that some kind person would actually take Yuno in. And it kind of ended up happening. Lucida, a very kind person as we've seen from this chapter, found Yuno, picked up the basket because she wasn't just going to leave a defenseless child there alone, and took him to Hage Village's orphanage. But like I said, we had Asta's origins answered, we found out more about his mom, and we had the origins revealed to AMD, and possibly the biggest question that we all had, how did AMD end up in the grimoire after Zagred failed to take it over? That question was also answered in this chapter. Such an amazing chapter. I actually am about to go back and reread it to see if I actually missed anything. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys thought about the chapter. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, drop me a like, subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. Comment down below with your thoughts and theories, and I will catch you guys next week. Peace.